Welcome to Creating Abundance, sharing inspirational stories from experts around the world. Tap into your inner wisdom at alanacahoon.com. I am delighted to welcome John Covach, the director of the University of Rochester Institute for Popular Music, the professor of music in the College Music Department, and the professor of theory at the Eastman School of Music. John has authored a number of books, American Rock and the Classical Music Tradition, and co-authored, it looks like, maybe up to a dozen books. Some of them, The Cambridge Companion to the Rolling Stones, What's That Sound, Understanding Rock, American Popular Music, and more. So with that, welcome, John. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. So before we move on anymore, I just wanted to let everyone know that I think you and I met just about a decade ago. I was one of those very lucky singers that got a call from a band that was a Pink Floyd tribute band saying, "Hey, Alana, do you want to sing that song where you get to go on stage and just riff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, hello." That was so much fun. What was the name of that band?
That band was called Heroes for Ghosts, and the track you're talking about is The Great Gig in the Sky.
Yeah, great gig in the sky. I think I have a recording, a video of that somewhere
Yeah, yeah.
floating in the
It's
ethers.
on it's on YouTube.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay. Well, then I'll have to look it up. Is it under Heroes for Ghosts?
Yeah, if people look up Heroes for Ghosts and then put in Great Gig, it should pop up, uh,
Okay.
one of the top ones.
So it's funny. I was looking for that and I came across your other band, which was someone said that it is the premier Yes tribute band in
Yeah,
America.
going for the one. Yeah, we did that for years, at least 10 years. And things, with COVID, a lot of things kind of shut down, and that project has never really got back up and running again. But we had a really nice run, that group.
Yeah, that was good. I remember seeing you. Um, and then most recently, I think was it during COVID you reached out or just near the end? And the latest idea is music for yoga meditation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the first time we got together to talk about this, we were both wearing masks.
Yeah.
So I think it was actually during the whole COVID thing, or the tail end of it anyway.
Yeah, so we've gotten together a number of times and we I have my singing bowls out there, my and and we've got fun music and we play everything from let's see, the Beatles to Nina Rao to
Hmm.
yeah,
Krishna Das
Krishna
is
Das, of
the big
course.
one. Yeah,
So what was you're from Detroit, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, born and raised there?
I was. Yeah, born in Detroit and lived either in suburban Detroit, West Side, or Ann Arbor. I went to college in Ann Arbor until I was about 30 years old, and so then, I think, as you know from your own domestic situation, when you're a university professor, you don't always get to choose where you live. You have to go where the jobs are, and so I came to Rochester for a year, then I was in Denton, Texas, then I was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 10 years. And I've been back here in Rochester for almost 20 years, but never gone back to Michigan to live.
Okay. Well, we're lucky to have you here in Rochester.
Thank you.
Very, very fortunate. Um, so then what inspired you to become this scholar of music and a great guitarist? We can see all your guitars lined up behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say, my some of my earliest memories are, the Beatles. I was born in 1959, so just about the time the Beatles were hitting in this country, February of '64. I was just turning 5 years old. And so, of course, it was a big thing. I lived in a neighborhood that had lots of kids in it, and a lot of the kids were older than us. And so they were older teenage kids with transistor radios listening to all this music and stuff. And of course, you always want to do what the bigger kids are doing, you know. And
Yeah.
so they were listening to this music, and it just it was seemed so such an exciting time that that just made me feel like that's what I want to do. I want to play music. And so it's, I went to university so I could have a nice day job, but basically, I've been a guitar player in my heart ever since.
Yeah. So what's your favorite kind of music to play?
Well, it's tough to say, but I will say right now I'm playing with a couple of older guys my age. We thought about calling ourselves the senile delinquents at one point. But we do a lot of 60s sort of Beatles music, circa 65, 66, 67, 68. I love that because that's what I grew up with, my first musical impression. So I love doing that. And we have fun, the three of us that play it together. So it's kind of a band, kind of a bowling team. But the music that I've always loved to play the most has been progressive rock from the 70s. And so thus, the Going for the One Yes tribute band. But, over the years, back in the 70s, in the late 70s, I had a band that was doing original music like that. And one of the reasons why I went to music school was because a big part of the progressive rock style had to do with blending rock music with classical.
Mm.
And so when the rock music thing didn't seem like it was going to go my direction because progressive rock kind of died out at the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, I just decided to go to the classical side. And that's what I did. Growing up where I grew up, the University of Michigan School of Music was just down the road. I didn't know it was one of the best schools of music in the country. It just was the one that was closest. And I liked the U of M sports teams. So off I went, and one thing led to another. And then, before long, I had a PhD and was doing theory and composition.
My goodness.
What do you know?
Congratulations. Serendipity, a little motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find I love looking at, well, I know you, and so I just love that you've been able to make a living as a musician and also in the education world the way you do. But really curious about how you introduced popular music into the higher education system.
Yeah, well, that was that again. Talk about showing up at the right place at the right time. So at the end of the '80s, as I was finishing my degree, I did a dissertation on 12-tone music, which, if people know much about that music, it's maybe the most severe, modern sort of dissonant music you can do. You may say, well, why did you choose that? Well, a lot of different reasons, but looking back on it now, I can see it was because as a rock guitar player in academia, I had something to prove that I could be just as serious minded as anybody. And so I, in fact, sort of chose the most severe form of classical music because that was the one that would most, sort of establish my credential as being somebody who really belonged in that world. Anyway, so that's what I was doing for my dissertation. And I went to my first teaching job, and I had, dabbled a little bit in writing papers about popular music and talking about that kind of thing because I'd had this whole lifetime playing in bands. And most people in music school at that time did not have that background because they'd all been rejected from music school because they played popular music and didn't do
Right.
classical. So, I somehow squeaked through. And then I was, somebody who had a PhD and was teaching at a big college and, also had this whole career. So I had this whole sort of expertise. I didn't intend it to be an expertise. I just played guitar in a band all those years. And so I started publishing on that. Well, just at about that time, the fields of music theory and musicology were starting to get interested in teaching popular music. I
Um,
just happened to be there with a
Perfect.
degree and with a background. And so I started to publish, and it got to the point where, I really couldn't fulfill all the publishing opportunities that came my way. I was offered the opportunity to write a textbook on the history of rock music. I took them up on it. Um, and the textbook has now been out for almost 20 years. We're in our sixth edition. It's the most used textbook across the country and around the world in the history of rock music. And really, I just sort of like, I don't know. That wasn't something that I planned. I didn't plan it to go this way. I just kind of followed the opportunities as they presented themselves and as they were, sympathetic to what I wanted to do, the kinds of things I wanted to do, and the rest kind of took care of itself.
That's a really great story. I'd like to imagine, though, that you have an incredible mind, a mental ability to focus and
Yeah,
seize
I,
upon that opportunity.
yeah. If you saw me around the house here most mornings, you probably wouldn't say that. I spend a lot of time drinking coffee and doing, not doing a lot of the things I'm supposed to do. So maybe there was a time in my life when I was a little bit more focused than I am now. But as I'm in my 60s here, I think I'm well, I would say there are some things I'm pretty focused. And and I have to tell my graduate students, you really do have to you know, I think a lot of people think that they can have many different things in life. And it's true, you can have a lot of different kinds of things, but you don't have to have them all at the same time. You can have things in sequence in your life. And in fact, it's good for you to continue to change and develop and go from thing to thing and to have a lot of different things happen in your life, but they don't have to all be happening at the same time. And maybe sometimes young people want to have all the good things in life at the same time, put enough focus on the things that will make those other things possible. So if I would make an argument for focus, it would simply be the more you focus early on, the more opportunity you'll have to have more of the things that you want to have in your life available to you.
Those are great words of wisdom. So, planning and seeing the opportunity, and how do you get from step A to step B, and absolutely being open to seeing those opportunities as well. It helps if it's serendipitous and you're in the right place at the right time.
Well, it's so true what you say about being open. That is, I think, the one thing that when it comes to my students, I advise dissertation students, people who are sort of launching into the same career, 30-ish, 30 years of age or so as me back then. And the one thing I find is that people can often have such a specific idea of what they want in life that they're not open to other possibilities.
Mm.
And so if you're too narrow and you're not open, you can potentially fantastic things that could really enrich your life will pass you by because it's not exactly the thing you're looking for. I mean, there's an old saying, you know, half of the two things you need to do is you need to be prepared for an opportunity and you need to recognize an opportunity. A lot of times people are really prepared, but only for a very narrow range of opportunities. And if those particular opportunities don't come by, they feel like they've been a failure or things haven't worked out. And my advice would be flexible. I'm a great book buyer. I like to buy used books. And if you go into a used bookstore and there's only one or two used books that you're interested in finding, almost every time you visit that used bookstore, you're going to have a disappointing experience because the chances of that particular book showing up at any shop are very small. But if you go in there and say, oh, let's see what they've got today, and you look in a bunch of different sections for a bunch of different things that interest you, you might be surprised that you find something you weren't even looking for that you really like. And that's kind of the way I see, career planning. I'm not saying be so open you'll do anything,
Yeah,
but you've got to let opportunity in.
right. I
And
think
the
that I
door
love
can't be so small, only one or two opportunities can present themselves.
Right. I like that example. In fact, I think I have a couple of your books here that you picked up along the way. So
That's right. Yeah.
I've been the fortunate receiver of that. Um, and it's as you're talking, John, it reminds me my own path. I started out in the arts, singer, songwriter, actress, and then moved into a number of things. I worked with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, and where I am now is a coach, helping people to be more present using mindfulness techniques. And I would have never thought that my love for meditation as a teenager was going to be my what I do for a living now. And that's really what I do. And I think that when you do meditate, you it's a training. It's training your mind to be in the present moment, to really see opportunities. And I believe you understand that because you have your own practice.
do. So about the time I was starting to get into all this Yes music and progressive rock in the 70s, um, I was, as I say, a big fan of Yes. And so one of their albums, Close to the Edge, is based or supposedly somewhat based on Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. And one of them is based around a footnote in Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. So all the way back when I was, I don't know, how old could I have been, 15, 14 or something, I was starting to get turned on to this whole idea of, Eastern religion, most especially Indian religion, the idea of meditation, and it could take you somewhere. And so, in 78, I think I joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, one of Yogananda's organizations. And I have to say that a lot of what I was reading back in those days that was, kind of considered new agey sort of philosophical stuff have really been the guiding principles throughout my career in academia. It's strange. Maybe it's not so strange. I was going to say it's strange, but maybe it's not. But that's the way it's worked out for me. And in the last several years, I've gotten much more interested in devoting myself to my meditation. I've mostly been more of what you might call a jnana yoga, in the sense that it's always been about knowledge and understanding for me, spirituality.
Right.
In the last few years, it's really been about meditation. So I took Kriya initiation, which is the Yogananda's. That's the lineage that he's in, Kriya Yoga, from a number of different gurus and lineages, and found out of that the practice that's best for me. And I have to say, it. I swear by it. You can't. It's difficult to. I mean, that's the kind of thing you can push on other people as much as you'd like to advise them. You have to try this. It's fantastic. It'll change your life. You come at them with something that sounds like religion, and they go running in the other direction. So they really have to kind of come to you. And I'm sure many of your students have come to you in just that way. But I have to say, the Kriya practice for me has been fantastic, and I can't imagine uh, ever not being a central part of my life. And it all goes back to Yogananda and the autobiography of Yogi, and yes, his Tales from Topographic Oceans, strangely enough.
Yeah. Well, this is wonderful. Um, what's interesting, I think, about Eastern philosophy, right? Philosophy versus religion, but there's a fine line. And what I find in meditation, mindfulness, it's about being a good person. It's morality, it's being a good person, which to me translates to conscious leadership, being a conscious individual, which means I listen more. And when you meditate, whichever style it is, and I don't practice Kriya. I've been exploring so many meditations. I kind of call it Alana meditation at this point. Um, but I find that there's value in almost any type of mindset. Mindset. It's really shifting your mindset to the present moment so that you're not getting stressed out about the future or depressed about the past. It's being here now and knowing exactly where you're at so that you can make wise decisions. So I would love for people who are listening to consider any kind of meditation, whether it be Kriya Yoga or other, as a way of thinking in life, of just being. Actually, it's really a way of
Mm.
being more present, which means again being a more active listener. And yeah, a lot of people who come to me, John, are stressed out and would just like to relax, be able to sleep better, and so yeah, so I'd like to circle back though to music because there's a lot of correlation with Eastern philosophies and music from the 60s and 70s. Would you like
Mhm.
to share about that?
Well, um, yeah, I mean, it was sort of was a big thing at the end of the 60s and throughout the 70s to be into Eastern philosophy and meditation. I mean, I'm sure many of your viewers, your listeners, will will know that the Sergeant Pepper cover has got, Yogananda and his gurus on the front of it. And, transcendental meditation, TM, was a big thing a big cultural thing. Sort of everybody knew the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And then, of course, there was Ram Dass and all that he did, especially with that book, Be Here Now. So it's amazing that as I've over the last several years, I've gotten more devoted to my meditation practice, how, especially among boomers, how many I've run into who are musicians. Now, why should that be? I don't know. Maybe it's temperament. But I have a bit of a theory on that.
Okay.
And my theory is that one of the things meditation, at least in my experience, one of the things meditation encourages us to do is to try to get to a very quiet place where the thoughts are not constantly racing through our head. And being in the present means not worrying about the past or worrying about the future, and just accepting the present and being open to it. So, in many ways, meditation is kind of about trying to get us to be conscious without thinking in words and language. And those of us who do music are pretty familiar with that frame of mind because we can think in music. If you ask me to listen for something in a piece of music, I will all of a sudden start listening and there will be no words in my head because I will be totally focused on the sound and when you're playing. And so we already have, I think, maybe kind of an ability to suppress or release the verbal parts of our mind so that we can focus on the musical parts. And maybe that makes it just a little bit easier to get deeper into meditation because you've already been kind of doing some of that releasing of the verbal. And maybe that's why you find more, at least I've found a lot of musicians in these circles, because, people stick with the things that they think that they're getting pretty good at. And if you have a pretty good start on meditation because you've been a musician, well, maybe you'll stick with it and there'll be more of those kinds of people in the community than others. I don't know. Maybe it's the same way with artists. Maybe it's the same way with dancers, but something about releasing the verbal flow because you're thinking about some other thing, I think makes meditation maybe a little bit easier. I don't know what your experience has been. You've spent a lot of time with musicians.
I've never actually thought about it. This is a new thing to consider, but it makes perfect sense. I'm very much a practitioner versus a scholar in this, although I read a lot, and I'm going to use my mother's phrase. She used to say, "My mind is like a sieve." I read a lot of stuff, but most of it just goes out. I only retain what I think is really important for me to. Um, but it makes perfect sense. Music is all about accessing that creative source within. And is it really any different from that higher power that many of us call God or
Right.
the one universe, etc.?
Your consciousness. I mean, some traditions ask you to focus, in meditation on the spiritual eye,
Hmm.
maybe light or whatever. But the important thing is when you're looking for something, you're not thinking about something. And whether or not you see anything or not, dropping the language is really important. Other traditions ask you to hear, you stop the ears and you listen for the cosmic sounds. And if you're listening for something, you're not thinking about something in words. So it makes me think that while there are many ways to get to this still point that we're all hoping to get to, where we can realize something very, very important and have that moment of enlightenment or realization or just relief from the tensions of the day. Um, Maybe the idea of looking at something or listening for something is a way of drawing our attention away from thinking about something because it's thinking about something that's getting in the way.
Yeah, it's overthinking. It's overthinking something. You can overthink something till it's, becomes something that it's not, and sometimes that doesn't make
Yeah,
sense. But also with the dance, the performing arts, the fine arts, they're all a meditation in and of themselves. So right, so you can listen to especially classical music and enter a state of bliss just being the receiver and appreciator of beautiful music. And the
right.
same for art. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that happens with, I mean, I've just been talking about kind of releasing language, but actually, I think everybody's had that experience where they're reading something, a novel or something that's really, really interesting them, and they become so engrossed that they lose track of time. In some
Yeah.
ways, you're reading and you're so engrossed in reading, you can't even remember where you are. I mean, you can once you look around, but so we talk about in the Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras, we talk about pratyahara, or loss of awareness of not loss of awareness of the body like it's a bad thing, but you become so internally focused that you just don't even really pay any attention to what's going on around you, what's happening in your body. People have an experience like that all the time when they get super absorbed in reading, and they'll be sitting there all of a sudden, you'll have started reading in the late afternoon. Before you know it, it's dark outside. You probably should have fed the cats. And 2 or 3 hours has gone by and you don't know what happened, right? That's a little bit the kind of world we're trying to get into with meditation, but in a kind of a systematic way so that we can go there every time we want to, not
Mm,
just on those moments when it just so happens something catches our attention enough that we lose track of time and get absorbed.
okay. That that makes a lot of sense. That's a beautiful approach to meditation. I was just thinking, oh, I got to change my meditation style. uh, I tend to go along the bodhisattva path. So I think because I was raised Christian and I went to a Catholic school for a long time, there's just a natural desire to help people, which is why I'm in coaching. And in my meditations, I'm often dedicating my entire meditation to the welfare of everyone.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I got to make sure that I put myself in there. I'm in there. I'm in that circle.
Yeah,
um,
that's marvelous. That's marvelous.
Thank you. And I did want to touch upon the mindfulness piece again because, you know, it would be great if we could all sit on a mountaintop and meditate, but that's not where most of us are. Any of us listening right now are probably either listening in your car or on the computer or on your phone, and you're working or you're doing. You're in a world of doing. That's the world that we live in today, where we're very active. And so how do you take that peace of mind that you achieve and attain during that sitting of stillness process on the cushion, is how we describe it, right, in meditation, and then bring that into your everyday life so that when moments of getting distracted and pulled away or angry or any undesirable feeling or reaction, that we can come back to that stillness. Whether I like to reach in my heart, but I know you've used the point here. um, that to me is what it's really about. It's bringing that blissful state or that peace or that wisdom or that stillness into your life and let it have a ripple effect to everyone. And what better way than in music?
Yeah. Well, Yogananda used to say, in India, when he was growing up, everybody wanted to go off to the Himalayas into a cave. And well, not everybody, but people were interested in meditation. The whole idea was to, leave society behind and go up into a cave and just find total silence and solitude for meditation. And he used to say, well, it's one thing to be able to find that kind of stillness in a cave in the Himalayas. It's another thing to be able to maintain it when you come back and join the rest of the world. That's much more difficult. And I think
Right.
that's exactly what you're addressing. Is it's one thing to, to find a nice quiet place and find stillness, but can you tap that stillness when everything around you is just absolutely crazy? And if you can, I think you're in a little bit better place than if you can't.
Yeah, depends how crazy it is. Um, well, so do you have any, yeah, I guess, how about, is there any single thing in your life that we haven't discussed, or maybe it is, any final words of wisdom?
Well, all I'll say is we've all got our paths and we've all got, our ways along the path. And I think, there are many, many different ways to do this thing. Um, One thing that has struck me in my experience is that this business of coming to sort of a greater equanimity and stillness is actually a lot less sensational than you might expect it to be. When I was a kid and I was reading Yogananda, I expected people to be levitating and appearing out of the mists and, all kinds of things. And still, when you hear people talk about meditation, they're expecting to have visions and there's a guru on a flaming pie and all this kind of thing. And it actually turns out, I think, that when the real thing happens to you, it seems a lot more pragmatic and a natural consequence of what you've been doing. That while there's a certain magic to it, it's not sensational. And it's kind of funny because people want stillness, but they want it to happen in a sensational way. If you think about it, that's kind of an opposite. If you want stillness, it should evolve in a way that is sort of natural and flowing and graceful, and not a big, sort of bang.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people get disappointed because when they go down the meditation path, dramatic things don't happen right away. Um, and I think that the only really way to go, and so their expectations are not met. And I think more proper expectations that meditation is a little bit more like putting money in a bank or going on a diet or playing a musical instrument. You've got to do it again and again and again over a period of time to see the results. And sometimes you won't see the results as soon as other people will see the results in you. And if that happens, so much the better. But there's no magic transformation that happens with a couple of mantras. I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that, but I'm pretty sure that's not the way it happens.
Yeah. Hence, it is called a practice.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And not a trick.
Right, right. Well, thank you very much, John, for your wisdom, your knowledge, and for stepping on your path so that we can enjoy and prosper ourselves. And with that,
All right.
namaste.
Namaste. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Creating Abundance. Be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next podcast and get your free ebook at alanacahoon.com/ebook.